So the Animorphs reach the mountains and set up base in a cave and spend a lazy afternoon trying to catch a fish with a line and hook. They spend several hours not catching anything and complaining about not catching anything, and all I can do is grab my hair, stomp my feet, and yell, "Two of you have osprey morphs! They are birds that are specifically designed to catch fish!" So after about wasting 6 hours working on something that could have been finished in 6 minutes, they finally catch a trout and acquire it. However, they don't have time to test their first fish morph out, because literally 2 minutes later the Yeerks arrive. Tobias saving that guy from the Hork-Bajir has resulted in the Yeerks doubling their security, and they shoot pretty much everything that moves, like some twisted science fiction version of the hunter scene in Bambi. The Animorphs morph fish in the cave, and Tobias has to carry them out one by one to the lake. Tobias catches the attention of a Hork-Bajir, who tries to shoot him but manages to hit the ship instead, leaving a nice little hole. Then the Yeerks' flagship, the Blade Ship, shows up. And who should be on board but the Animorphs' greatest enemy and the diabolical mastermind to the whole invasion, Dealing Dan Hawk. Nah, it's Visser 3. He kills the Hork-Bajir with a stormtrooper's aim in some gruesome off-camera way, and the supply ship gets on a suckin'. You'd think these tubes would have some kind of grate to at least prevent rock from getting sucked up, but the Animorphs make it in easily, only to discover there's no way into the ship proper from the water tanks. To make matters worse, Tobias is spotting acting all unhawk-like, and the Yeerks go after him. He manages to land on top of the supply ship, where the Yeerks can't shoot him. Rachel Thought speaks to him through the ship and tells him that they're basically screwed, and if he can, Tobias needs to somehow destroy the ship. Some Taxxon troops climb to the roof, and with some hawkish sleight of hand, Tobias manages to steal one of their weapons. He flies over the transparent dome that is the ship's deck, fires the weapon, and just manages to hit the right display to cause a chain reaction that ultimately causes the ship to crash. The water tank rips open, the Animorphs morph birds and haul ass out of there, but not before the female hawk shows up to get shot. I don't know, seemed a bit safer with Dealing Dan. The Animorphs regroup. While the destruction of the supply ship marks the first real victory for the Animorphs, Marco brings home the realism. A. They destroyed it by complete accident. B. They didn't intend to destroy it at all. And C. Blowing up one supply truck isn't going to hurt Walmart, and destroying one supply ship isn't going to set back the Yeerks. As with most Animorphs books, we end on the bittersweet. Post-book follow-up. For me, this is when the Animorphs finally found its footing. The series was at its best when the external conflict was relatively realistic and dealt directly with the Yeerks. The Animorphs discover a Yeerk ship and try to deal with it, and its internal conflict affected the Animorphs' group dynamic. Tobias' mental freakout ended up with him getting closer to Rachel and getting further from everyone else. I'm not the biggest fan of Tobias' overall character throughout the series, as he'll gradually become a bit louder and a bit more whiny, but at this point in the series, he's easily the most complex and interesting character out of the five. It's a widely considered theory that Tobias got himself stuck in Hawkmorph on purpose, a theory I personally subscribe to. Tobias was deeply troubled from the start of the series and never seemed all that rational. Now, I grew up in a large, loving family and wasn't picked on in school more than any other guy, but at 13 and entering high school, I thought my life was horrible. My body was doing weird things. I was under some delusion that I shouldn't be happy if I didn't have a girlfriend. And one time I got a C. Oh no! My point is, hormones and misconceptions about how the world worked resulted in a skewed view of reality, and I had everything going for me. Tobias is 13, dealing with hormones, and his life actually did suck, and thus why he took such an extreme measure and trapped himself in the form of a hawk as a means of escaping it all. This book deals directly with the aftermath of that choice. To use an analogy, it's like if Tobias got fed up with his life, stole a car, and decided to drive off into the sunset, only to crash the car into a light pole 3 blocks away. If the first book was Tobias stealing the car, this book was him realizing that he never knew how to drive in the first place, realizing that his life is now much worse because he foolishly thought he had found an answer. A lot of foolish decisions will be made throughout the series, and the consequences will never be shied away from, but here it's pounded the hardest and the clearest. I screwed up, and there's no going back. This book deals with some of the problems I had with the second one. For one, the other 4 Animorphs don't feel like background characters, and the interaction between the characters are stronger. Tobias and Rachel become a lot closer throughout the book, probably because they're the 2 most over-emotional and irrational of the 5. We also get some good development on Marco, who we learn is only still involved in the year conflict because he cares too much for his friends to ditch them. If it was Marco and 4 guys he didn't know, he'd get his dad and head for the desert without a second of hesitation. Marco is in many ways Tobias' opposite, as he doesn't idolize and emotions don't lead him the same way Tobias does. You get a sense of antagonism between the two. The writing is well done, and everything is given the right pace. Action scenes are quicker, and reflective scenes are slower, and it makes for a good read. Some fans have complained that there's less action in this than most books, and thus the book was boring. But realize that Animorphs is about people, first and foremost. If I had any problems with the book, it's probably the Dealing Dan Hawk opening, as it seems to be too stupid of a move for the Animorphs to make at this point in the series. If this had been in the second book instead of the third, it might have gelled more, but as is, it's pretty silly. But other than that, it's a really, really good book, and my personal favorite of the first dozen. I give Animorphs number 3, The Encounter, a 9 out of 10.
I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. I want to fly.
I can't help myself.